Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of SuperCoach, mates. Well, the trade period is over. The fixture for 2025 has been released, and as of next Wednesday, we will have about sort of 50 or 60 new AFL players realizing their AFL dreams. So, we're just going to sort of have a look back at the trade period tonight. And just sort of see where we think some of the big names, how they might impact at their new club. So as per normal, I am joined by Thomas. How are you going, Thomas?
Yeah, not too bad. Enjoying the warm weather. Obviously Nathan's. Off air, he's been blowing a fuse about the 2025 fixture, which released. We're recording this obviously Friday night. So this released 2 days ago. So yeah, definitely some
Yesterday.
interesting. Yeah, or yesterday. Sorry.
Yesterday.
Yeah.
So Thursday, the 14th of November.
Sorry. Yeah, that's definitely an interesting kind of tidbit to go through. And a couple of the new clubs have actually released some rebrandings as well. Gold Coast some released their rebrand, and I think St Kilda released a new logo next Tuesday. So definitely interested to see how that goes. Adelaide's obviously released their new logo. We'll have a quick kind of review of the logos next week just to see how Nathan thinks about them and if he blows another fuse on maybe some of the media teams, or maybe not the media teams, but each team's kind of creativity department and how they've changed their club's logos. But yeah, as I said, we'll talk about how each teams, or not each teams, it's kind of as Nathan said, the big trade period getters, or the trade names that will impact the SuperCoach scene, both in classic and draft. But yeah, kicking things off, as we both mentioned, the highly anticipated fixturing was released in 2025, so next year. Definitely some controversial decisions they've made, obviously with opening rounders, and that's another story in itself, and some clubs getting better fixturing than others. Oh, Nathan obviously isn't too happy. What are you not too happy about, Nathan, with regards to fixturing?
Well, I'll tell you what I'm not happy about, Thomas. I cannot understand how the side that finished 8th on the ladder has got the third easiest draw next year. That just does not make any sense whatsoever. And the side that finished one spot below them, which is Collingwood, has got the third hardest draw. I don't understand how on earth this is meant to be the case when you've got all these equalisation measures in place, and yet the one thing that they sort of can equalise to some extent is the fixture, and they've mucked it up again. So to the AFL, this needs to honestly become either a 19-game season or something else, because this is just getting borderline ridiculous now that you've got the side that finished 8th having the third easiest draw. And I'm telling you now, if they are not top 2 next year, that's a failure. Of course, I'm talking about Carlton, that is. Sydney Swans, who made the grand final, have the 9th easiest draw. So again, and North Melbourne, who finished 17th, have a harder draw than Sydney. I just don't understand how that is meant to possibly work in a system where, they try and equalise everything. They've got the salary cap in place, so everyone can spend the same. And yet when it comes to the most important thing, which is the fixturing, they can't get that right. So I don't know where to from here. There's a few other sides who I feel like Essendon have been really harshly done by. I don't know what to make of Essendon's draw. They are literally, they've got Brisbane up there, they've got Sydney twice, they've got Geelong twice, who they never beat. They've got the Dogs twice as well. So I just don't understand how that's meant to work. So to the AFL, I don't know whoever's doing the fixturing here. I know that they're hiring this Canadian company to do the fixturing, but seriously, they need to have a look at it. I don't understand how 3 sides who have been historically the 3 worst sides cannot possibly have the 3 easiest draws next year. I know Richmond have the easiest draw, but then West Coast are 6. So Carlton, who finished 8th, somehow have an easier draw than the side who finished 16th as well. So the only side, according to this, the only side who Carlton have an easier draw, who has an easier draw than Carlton, is Melbourne and Richmond. And we all know that everyone says the fixture doesn't make that much of a difference. I can guarantee you now it makes a massive difference. Because if you dig a little bit deeper as well, Carlton play one finalist in the first 9 weeks of the season. So if they're not on top of the ladder, that's a failure. And then again, you go to the flip side, Collingwood have only played one non-finalist in their first eight matches. So I just don't understand how this fixture is meant to be the way that it is when you've got the salary cap in place, which is meant to equalize everything, and then you can't get probably the second most important thing after, of course, the scoreboard, which is the integrity of the fixturing. So I don't know where to from here. Have you got a solution to this, Thomas? Because I feel like every year this just is an ongoing discussion, and I feel like this year that Carlton have basically been given a leg up. And I'm saying now, if they don't finish top 2, I'm just going to say that's a failure. So for Carlton, they have to make the grand final. Otherwise, it's a failure.
Yeah, no, I do understand the frustration. It's one of those things where it's interesting. I mean, obviously, we're looking at it from a lens of being obviously highly engaged in the AFL landscape and SuperCoach and whatnot. But, you look at other sports like the Premier League, NBA, NFL, there's not too much conversation. I mean, I'm only speaking from an outside and don't follow, probably other than the Premier League, don't follow these other sports as heavily. But there's never really an uproar about fixturing and kind of...
Well, there isn't because...
Sport. Yeah.
The EPL play each other twice. I think the NBA play each other. I think it's 4 times or 3 times during the home and away year.
Yeah.
I think it might be 4 times, actually. I think World Series, but I think the baseball, they play each other about 3 or 4 times a year as well. So there's no issue there. So I don't know why the AFL constantly has this issue.
Yeah, no, I find it baffling. I spoke to a mate last night, actually, like we were catching up for dinner before the Socceroos game and spoke about the fixturing, and I found it interesting how I remember looking at St Kilda's draw when it came out on Thursday Arvo, and I saw that we were playing, I think, Essendon, for example, quite late, and have played other double up teams, twice already before even playing Essendon once, which I found it interesting. Just doesn't make sense why you do play those double up teams before you even play another team once. Just seems kind of interesting in the landscape of things. You look at St Kilda's, and I'll touch on this when I explain the draw, but St Kilda had going to Adelaide 3 times in 5 weeks, something insane. So, those kind of questions need to be raised. I don't know where fixed lies. I know the mate I was speaking to mentioned about having kind of a 6-6-6 set up with the ladder. Everyone plays each other once, and then you've got the top 6 make automatic qualification and final, the middle 6 playoff for finals, playoff for the last 2 spots for finals. So a bit more of a traditional ladder setup, similar to the Premier League, where you've got relegation and promotion issues. But yeah, it's definitely an interesting conversation. You could talk to anyone really, and you get 10,000 different responses with regards to how people view the fixture. But just on what Nathan was saying before, we talk about these traded players in the SuperCoach landscape. You look at Collingwood, for example, round 1, opening round, GWS round 1, Port Adelaide round 2, Dogs. Then you got the bye, Carlton round 4, Sydney round 5. That is a tough fixture for a team.
And then keep going. Keep going.
Round 6,
keep going.
Round 6, Lions. Then round 7, probably eased off a little bit, but tough Anzac Day fixture.
Essendon,
then the Cats,
keep going.
Then Freo, then the Crows.
Yeah, stop there.
Yeah.
Right, so round 9. So every match before round 9, we have got a finalist from last year, except for one, we finished 9th. I don't understand that.
Yeah, no, I don't either. That's the first time I've seen Collingwood's draw, and that's pretty insane. Looking at St Kilda's one, and I'm just bringing up my phone here. We had the whole uproar with regards to how many times you go to Adelaide in the first 5 weeks. I may as well fly over there and stay there for 5 weeks. But Crows in Adelaide, then the Cats, then the Tigers, then Port in round 4, then back-to-back in the Giants. I'm assuming the Saints will stay there for the entire week, which I guess is not the worst thing. Then the Dogs, Lions, Freo, Blues, West Coast. So for a team that came lower than the Pies, look, you probably take the Crows and Richmond game, no problem. But yeah, Geelong played finals, Port played finals, Giants played finals, Dogs played finals, Lions won it, Freo were close, Carlton played finals. Really until round 10, where we get a good run of West Coast, Suns, Melbourne, then the bye. So yeah, definitely a tough thing. And I guess, there's always the argument of, you have to beat the team in front of you to make finals. But at the end of the day, you've got other teams who have a better fixture. There's always going to be compromises with regards to this. You're never going to really find a right idea. I just don't know what the goal is. There's probably, unfortunately, realistically speaking, there's probably other issues in the AFL right now that need to be addressed before the fixture. But yeah, if they can kind of, within the next couple of years before Tasmania come in, to find a really rigid structure which doesn't let the AFL get exposed to these kind of issues, is probably what Laura Kane and Andrew Dillon need to kind of fix ASAP, because especially if they want to keep this opening round crap, which I know I'm not a huge fan of, Nathan. I'm assuming you're the same.
I don't mind that, actually.
Well, yeah. Well, yeah. So it's one of those things I don't enjoy it at all. But yeah, Nathan's on the opposite fence. But it's one of those situations where they need to find a thing that will basically stop themselves exposed to the conversation about the integrity of the competition, because you want to obviously make the competition as fair as possible. And last year they opened themselves up to conversations around teams having played 3-4 games in a short amount of time. Like St Kilda had a very, very shitty patch last season where they played 4 games within 6 weeks or something like that, where the team was exhausted. And that was, I think, the week before we played the Dogs at Marvel and got pumped in that game. And then it came out that the players were just absolutely busted their ass off from playing 3 games interstate. So yeah, it's definitely interesting how it's almost like a swings and roundabout fixtures. You've got patches where you have a shit patch and then you have a really good patch. It's never really a consistent fixture. So I think that's something the AFL can look towards. But yeah, definitely interesting one for sure, and something that as we hit round 0 and round 1 next season, an interesting conversation point, something we can reflect upon to see how this fixturing affects teams' early days next season. But moving on to what this episode is really about is the traded players. As we said, we're going to go through the top 11 picks. We're not going to go through every single player just because some of them, I don't think they're SuperCoach relevant, have never really been, so there's no really point talking about them. But these players, I think, at some point or another have been relevant, some more so than others. First off the bat, we'll keep this nice and short so we don't bleed your ears for about an hour when everyone's in off-season mode anyway. But first off the rank is Jack Macrae, who's traded to St Kilda as a desperately needed elite ball user, was out of favour from the Dogs due to their stacked midfield. You look at his average in 2024 was 72.8, played the 18 games, but I think a lot of them were subs. So that high to low score you can see on your screens now, the low score is essentially the score they scored the lowest without being sub-affected. A lot of these players had sub-affected scores which were lower, so I've removed those out of the equation just to get a bit more of an accurate reading. So he got a high of 123, low of 58. He's probably going to play inside mid for us. I can't see him not playing round 1. What are your thoughts, Nathan, on bringing in Jack Macrae in your SuperCoach sides? We all know what he's capable of, give it only 2 years ago that he was basically top 5 elite ball user in the midfield. Do you reckon it's best, almost like a best before used by date where he's expired, or there's a chance he can bounce back and for a discounted price in a St Kilda side where they've been crying out for an elite ball user, he's maybe the saviour for the next couple of years whilst those youngsters are developing?
Nah, I'd be getting him in. Just lock and load. If he gets through pre-season, he would not have possibly had a worse season than he had last season. So I'm looking up some stats now. And by the way, I should actually mention, so huge thanks to Rioli Ratings, which have provided all the stats that we've done throughout the trade period and, all those stats that matter for the grand final stuff. So, yeah, huge shout out to Rioli. Keep doing your great work here. But he had his second worst season last year off his player rating. So I just can't see any way that he doesn't improve next year. So I think he's just simple lock and load. He will play inside mid next year. He will be a bash brother with Jack Steele. And I don't know who your third midfielder will be, but he will be a bash brother in there. I guess the only question mark I'd have on him perhaps is his ability to play in other positions. Like I sort of feel like he's a bit like an inside mid or nowhere else. So that's potentially his only downside. But yeah, at this stage, if he gets through preseason and he can build a fitness base that is strong, then I can't see why you wouldn't take the risk on him, because it's not like he was injured. He's just out of form. So, or he just wasn't picked. So I just think that this is a no-brainer, that if he's getting through preseason, you're just starting him because you know what he's capable of. And he's in the prime of his career as well at 30 years old. So no-brainer for me.
Yeah, I think that, the people that say he's past his prime, I disagree. You just have to look at his VFL form. He was racking up like crazy. He was played all over the shop in the last 2 seasons. He really should be played as that inside mid, as that extractor and that clean ball used to get the ball inside 50. And I think for that short amount of time where he's probably, 2 to 3 years before, you're looking at his back end of the career, I think he can really help the likes of Steele. That's what Steele's been crying out for, kind of a Batman and Robin combination, to help kind of fast track the development of the likes of Philippou and things like that. Because at times, we had Seb Ross in there and it's just not cutting it. I think Macrae's a step above the rest with regards to his disposal efficiency in particular. But next, moving off the rank, is Harry Perryman, one of your boys that Craig Macrae selected in the trade period. You look at the 2024 average. I think he had a few sub games, not too many, so this is more of a accurate representation of his average. 77.5, 19 games, high of 131. He's capable of pumping out those scores, but obviously has a low floor, with 44 being his non-sub affected lowest score. I think he probably plays in that midfield to help a bit of grunt work, or maybe off the half back if you need it. What are your thoughts? This is me obviously guessing a little bit, considering I don't watch too many Giants games, but coming from a Collingwood diehard like yourself, what are your thoughts on Harry Perryman? Where do you think he'll play next year, and where do you think he lands in that SuperCoach minefield?
Yeah, well, I heard Haynes Skipworth talk about Perryman because he's running our preseason training program, and I think he mentioned that Perryman was default position was the midfield, and they would sort of rotate him around positions. I don't think I'd be picking him for SuperCoach. I just think, and again, we might get onto another Collingwood recruit in a minute, who I just have the same concern about, and that is I just don't know what their set role's going to be. And I don't think you can be sort of gambling on sort of him playing in the midfield one week and then going to half forward the next week and then going back to half back next week. I just don't think that works for SuperCoach. So, I mean, I think he'll get games at Collingwood. No doubt about it. I think he'll find his way in there. It's just for SuperCoach, I just don't think he's got to that level yet that I would be trusting to pick him. And so just going off last year, so his player rating was slightly below his career average. But there's not really a lot of sort of stats that he sort of, ranks highly in. He's on page 3 for the overall general defender or the medium defender rankings. He's not up there really for disposals or possessions or anything like that. So I just would be perhaps tempering expectations a little bit if you go for him for SuperCoach. But obviously, as a Collingwood supporter, I can't wait to see him running around, because I think he can make a difference, even if I think he's probably getting slightly overpaid. But that's just my nitpick. I would say probably avoid for Classic, and he might be worth a bit of a gambling draft. But otherwise, I don't think I'd be going near him.
Yeah, I don't think, unless he was, playing predominantly as a forward eligible pick, I don't think he's relevant at all. too many doubts around his role. He didn't really have a defined role at the Giants anyway. He's one that, maybe look at draft if he does solidify a midfield spot and he's able to get those contested numbers up and play as a contested midfielder. But yeah, one that we advise probably to avoid altogether, which is probably seems a bit obvious considering he didn't light the house on fire with regards to scoring potential with the Giants. But Dan Houston's on the flip side, I would reckon one of the most important players for SuperCoach next season with regards to whether you pick him or not. A lot of people didn't pick him to start with, myself included, when he was playing for Port this season. And for the majority of the season, were burnt quite heavily considering how well he scored. He probably had a few low scores in there, but he was able to score insanely good. As we saw, his high of 174 last season, averaged 106.8, which I didn't think he was capable of. Having been a Dan Houston owner before, I know that as soon as he loses that kind of main halfback position role, he really suffers. But it seemed this season that even with the likes of Kane Farrell, Miles Bergman and all those halfback distributors for Port, he was able to be the primary ball user, which makes him even more important for SuperCoach, I think, next year, considering that, in my opinion, correct me if I'm wrong, Nathan, you can kind of have a deeper dive considering you'll be watching majority of his games. I can see him, unless they do something crazy, playing him on the ball as that ball user. I could see him being the main distributor off halfback and almost being the kick-out taker as well, considering how lethal he is off with his foot. And I could see that average if he does play that main role, because the Pies didn't really have a primary kick taker for their season this year. I could see that average bumping from, that 106 to probably even a 110 if he stays fit. What are your thoughts, Nathan, on Houston? And will you be picking him either in Classic or Draft?
Yeah, well, it's interesting, this, because I just saw on Instagram earlier today that another one of our young players, Reef McInnes, was actually training off the halfback flank, which raised a bit of eyebrows for me because he's always played his time as a forward. And then he was lining up at the halfback flank today. So, I just don't know what role Houston has at this stage.
Yeah.
I have heard them say that they would like to try him on the wing. Which I don't know how that's going to go if he's on the wing. It's probably a no for me. So I think for Houston, it might be sort of a watch and wait for him. Just sort of get through pre-season, just sort of see where he's lining up. But yeah, we know that Macrae likes to have flexibility, so I can probably guarantee you now he's probably not going to play the whole game off the halfback flank. So I mean, he's a top kick. I mean, Collingwood know what they're getting. He was 5th overall this year for his player ratings for all the general defenders, as they're called, or medium defenders. So only Sheasel, Sinclair, Holmes, and Flanders were ahead of him. So, he's on the first page of basically all these stats on here. Top 5 for tackles, obviously not a hit-out player. He's not on the first page for marks, never mind what I just said. He's top 10 for clearances. Probably top 20 for contested possessions, top 20 disposals. So they know what you're getting with him. Yeah. But yeah, at this stage, I think I'm going to say sit and wait because I'm just not sure where he's going to actually play.
Yeah, I think, he's definitely a big watch in the preseason because, as you said, if he does consistently play halfback, he's a big conversation starter. For first.
And the other thing I should, sorry to butt in. The other thing I should mention too, I don't know if it counted this year, but he is suspended for round. Round. I don't know if that counts for Classic. I don't know if they counted opening round for Classic last year or 2024. So that's the other thing I would say is that if opening round gets counted, I would probably say you can't start him. If he doesn't. I don't know. I still think it might be a bit of a risk, especially if he does flop, because if you picked him, you're probably not banking on him moving on. So I just think that given the fact that he's not going to play opening round, I just would have loved him to play opening round just to sort of see what role he had in that Collingwood lineup. But we don't get that chance before lockout. So, yeah. Sorry to butt in.
No. Yeah, 100% agree. I think if he does play that distributor role in preseason, then you almost use that opening round as a free hit for him and see how he goes. Because I believe, obviously, when the 2025 team picker comes out, this will be confirmed. But yeah, I believe opening round counted as within the price changes. So it essentially gave players a free look at the round 0 players and then allowed them to trade accordingly if you did own them to start with. So he's one that, is very much preseason.
Well, he's not playing opening round. He's not playing round 0.
Yeah, round 1. Yeah, that makes. Yeah, you're right. I'm keep forgetting that. But yeah, it makes it a bit difficult then. But yeah, I would say preseason then really watch those games with intent to see if he does play that distributor role. But moving forward to a couple of the Crows boys, both from the Giants. First one being Isaac Cumming. Only played the 4 games, was really left out the side this season, dropped out of favour for the likes of, Lockie Whitfield coming back into form and the others that were playing off half-back, likes of Buckley playing, who else was in that side? Connor Iden. Yeah, there was a few players that were making that GWS defensive line tick, and Cumming wasn't part of their plans moving forward. Average 66.8 across those 4 games. This was a bit of a harder one to gauge at because he only played the 4 games. High of 99, didn't crack the ton. Low of 36. Having said that, the Crows really don't have a halfback runner other than Mitch Hinge, who probably needs a bit of support. Their defensive line was never amazing, I don't think. If you look at it on paper, they struggled a fair bit. Their midfield and forward line are pretty strong, but yeah, the defensive line not so much. Where do you think Cumming plays? Do you reckon he plays more as a one-on-one defender based on his height or as a running halfback? And can you see that average spiking a fair bit, considering that he probably gets a bit more opportunity with the ball at the Crows?
Yeah, well, I'm just looking now. So the Champion Data have actually got him listed as a midfielder, which I think says enough to me that I just don't know what you're going to get from him. So, yeah, yes, I think his best position probably is halfback, and I think that's probably where he will play at Adelaide. So, yes, I can see that average spiking, but again, I think he's going to be one in the preseason that I sort of put on the watch list. And just have a look and see. Because, I think he can make a difference to that Adelaide side. And obviously, I think Adelaide have high expectations on them this year. I think they got a top 5 for easiest draw next year. So, I guess the pressure's on Matty Nicks to just prove that, 2023 wasn't the flash in the pan and that that last year was just a dip that they needed. So, yeah, I think Cumming will have a role to play at Adelaide, but I think he's going to be one that I sort of sit and watch on, just to sort of see what his role is.
Yeah, no, that's fair enough. He's again. A lot of these players are preseason wait and sees, but yeah, Cumming is one that I think will probably get more opportunity at the Crows anyway. But whether or not he deserves a spot in our defensive lineups is probably yet to be seen, because it's more the case that, we looked at a lot of these running halfbacks and players in our defensive 6 who are able to score hundreds very, very consistently. You probably need those players to start off the season and get those premiums right to make sure you're well on your way on to getting a good 2025 season rank. But moving on to the next Crows players, probably a little bit more relevant than Cumming, is James Peatling. So he was never really someone that was on our radars within the home and away season itself. But yeah, blew the house down with his finals performance, was one of the best finals players going around. Reshaped that Giants midfield with his kind of two-way running, similar to Jack Steele, was utilised as a tagger, defensive midfielder, what have you. 17 games, for an average of 65.5. When I was doing a little bit of that research, a lot of the scores were sub-affected. That lower 40 was one of his few that weren't sub-affected. High of 133 within the home and away season. I think he probably plays inside mid or maybe off that half-back line, pushing into the midfield very quickly, or vice versa as that high half-forward, pushing in as an extra mid. Do you think he maintains his spot or not maintains his spot? Do you think he gains a spot in the Crows midfield? And if so, is he an option in 2025 for SuperCoach?
Is he a quick play? Like, is he an explosive type player?
I'm not too sure. I don't watch too many Giants games. I believe he's more of that consistent two-way runner who can work hard both ways. I don't think he's got that explosive speed in him, but he's definitely one that, from the eye test when he was playing at the Giants, was very obvious around the midfield stoppages. What I mean by that is, those midfielders who sometimes go missing in stoppages. He was very prevalent in being
So like
engaged
a
in that.
Jack Macrae. Are we
Yeah,
talking like a Jack Macrae or a Will Day?
yeah, I would say something like that. But almost, I would say more so Jack Steele, that ability to run to and have those
Well,
tackling pressures.
I'm not really sure if Adelaide need that type of midfielder. Because I feel like they've probably got that with with Laird. Although the only thing I will say, actually, I might take that back actually, because I did forget the Roy Sloan has retired. So I could see Peatling perhaps being the Roy Sloan replacement, and Roy obviously played midfield. So yes, there might be a spot there for him, but I think he's going to have to be the one to earn it. I don't think they're just going to give him that spot, because obviously I think Adelaide's midfield, while it perhaps is lacking a little bit of speed, I think there is a few other players who are quite similar to him. I feel like that if he's the Jack Steele type that you're saying, that he's probably going to have a bit of competition there, but I think he is good enough to break into that side. Last year was actually his career best year with his player rating. So, he's what are we now? We're into year 5 of him now. So he's obviously still only quite young. I don't know, he's 24. Okay, so it's 25 this year. So he's entering his prime. Look, I think it might be a big year for Peatling. So I wouldn't be starting him, but again, he's probably someone I chuck on the watch list and just sort of track him through the preseason.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, that's fair enough. That's understandable. I think he's very impressive player. He was very impressive in the final series, but that's a very small sample size to go off. Consistency across the home and away season yet to be seen. I think if he starts the house on fire in the midfield, they were really crying out for that midfield bull, with the likes of Rory Sloan retiring. I think he's one that can replace Sloan in that sense, play a similar role. That's one to be seen, that's for sure. But moving on to another Giants player that has left to the Blues, Nick Haynes was one that I believe was SuperCoach relevant, maybe not this year, but the year before or the year before that, playing that halfback role, was capable of scoring quite highly when given the right position. Played only 8 games a game, was one of those players where a lot of it was sub-affected, 69.9, a high of 116. So he's capable of hitting that, 110 plus, low of 23. On the flip side, when he did play, sometimes he just absolutely fell apart. The problem, I think, from watching Giants games is he never really held down that halfback role. He was playing a high half forward, as a more of a lockdown role when the likes of Buckley and Sam Taylor were injured. What do you think his position is at the Blues? Again, similar to Cumming, do you reckon he plays a one-on-one lockdown role, or do you reckon he has a bit more freedom off halfback? My instinct, he probably plays a little bit more defensively modern, considering the Blues already have those run and gun halfbacks in Sard and Williams. Williams was playing forward more so last year, so more so Sard. Do you reckon? Doherty as well when he was fit and healthy game. But yeah, what are your thoughts on Haynes?
So I just wonder if Haynes sort of becomes like their third tall, if you will, who sort of can go and help out, because I don't think Wiedering's gonna become a Harris Andrews type over preseason. Look, he might, and if that's the case, then Nick Haynes is probably playing key defender. But the way that I read it at the minute is I think that's Mitch McGovern and Wiedering have the two sort of key pillars. So I think Haynes will end up being that third tall defender, if you will. He might end up being their main interceptor, which sometimes doesn't score well and sometimes it does. So at this stage, look, the pedigree's there, But again, I think at this stage, I think the only place I'd have for him is the watch list, and just sort of see how he goes and how he's fitting in. But yeah, I at this stage it's a no.
Yeah.
But again, he might end up on the watch list and sort of just tracking him over the preseason.
Yeah, no, I do agree with regards to that. I don't think he's one that's overly relevant with regards to SuperCoach. I don't think he's going to be one that goes to the Blues and suddenly exceeds expectations by scoring consistent hundreds. I think he plays more of a lockdown role anyway. I think they needed someone that's a bit more defensively minded. I've always been critical with the Blues that they've got so many running guard midfielders and just no one that can really lock down a defensive line spot other than McGovern and Wiedering. So he maybe plays that battle role like a St Kilda-esque where he has the ability to rebound, but he's more as an intercept marker. And I think that's where his SuperCoach scores get stagnated a little bit, but I would cross him off the watch list altogether and don't worry about it. But Bailey Smith is one that's very, very interesting and probably more of a fun pick than anything. Didn't play due to an ACL injury, well documented last season. Was always looking for a new career path, and that was for the Cats down the highway. This was from 2023, mind you, obviously didn't play this season. So his high of 121, a low of 41. I could see him flourishing as an inside mid alongside the likes of Holmes and Dangerfield to really rejuvenate that midfield mix, or as a high half forward. What are your thoughts on Bailey Smith? Obviously, one of the most touted trade talks this season. Do you reckon there is a chance that people pick him? And if so, will they be greatly rewarded? Or do you reckon there is very high risks laced in this pick due to obviously an ACL injury? I've done an E myself, so I know the risks going back in too early or not being able to go back to your best due to doubt and whatever. But what are your thoughts on Bailey Smith?
Well, I think this is a very simple case for me. If he's midfielder only, no, scratch him. If he's a forward, I think he probably deserves more consideration as a forward, given that the forward line's probably going to be the hardest area again next year. So I think he's probably going to play midfield at Geelong. So if you can pick a bona fide midfielder in the forward line, you just take that. Bit like a Robbie Gray or a Paddy Dangerfield back in the day. You just lock and load them. I think he's probably going to be reasonably priced, given that he's probably going to get the 30% pricing discount because he didn't play at all last year. So I don't know what he started at this year. I think it was sort of. I don't know what he started at. Hang on, I'll just quickly get up what he started at, Bailey Smith. Let me just get it up. I probably should have had a look at this beforehand, but that's all right. Bailey Smith started at 448,600. So if you knock off 30% from that, that's probably going to put him in the high 300. In the low 300s. So I think at that price, I think he'd be worth a bit of a risk. Just to sort of have a look at and see. So based on hang on, I'll tell you now. So yeah, he's going to lose 100. So he'll be about 310,000 if my calculations are correct. I think at that price, he's be pretty hard to ignore at that price, given he's a top 10 pick. So yeah, I think if he's a forward eligible and because he didn't play last year, I don't see why he wouldn't be. I think he's just one who you might just sort of have to, make the space for, because I feel like he's going to really flourish at Geelong. I guess the only question is that injury factor, and that it's not like it's a player who's out of form. He has been injured, and unfortunately, the recurrence rate in ACLs can be high in some people. So I guess that's just a bit of a watch. But you can't deny his talent, and you can't deny that his best football is priced way above 310,000, which is what I've got him projected to be at. So, I think for me, if he gets through pre-season, Geelong have confidence in his knee. He's got confidence in his body. I think he will go into the Jack Macrae camp for me, where I think he's just going to be locked and loaded.
Yeah. No, I think he's role dependent, and you look at the likes of Holmes where he was thrown to the correct role, and a youngster like him with limited speed is going to flourish at the Cats. They seem to have transformed their game to some degree from that traditional chipmunk style, which served them so well, and is almost a little bit outdated now with how fast the game is going. And they've added speed to the ball, and Bailey Smith ticks that box in the Holmes category of speed. And I think if he's able to get back to his form and get through pre-season unscathed, as Nathan said, as soon as you do an ACL, the chances of re-rupturing is pretty high in comparison to healthy knees, because there is always that risk that your knees are weaker, regardless of the amount of rehab you do. And having gone through one myself, I think it's one of those things where AFL players are rushed in to some degree. Obviously, they've got the best medical attention going around, but yeah, they obviously come back ready to play quite quickly. Having said that, Bailey Smith didn't play at all in 2024, so he's got a full preseason on his belt, a full off-season to get his body right, and I think he'll be raring to go for the Cats. That's for sure, and almost have a point to prove with regards to missed opportunities at the Dogs and the hype that came in his draft year as well, and how much he's capable of proving his haters wrong, that's for sure. But moving on to the back end of our discussion for tonight, Daniel Rioli. We spoke about this a little bit in our Gold Coast Suns podcast, but yeah, kind of transformed himself from a player who looked like he was going nowhere, and then he went into the halfback role and went from strength to strength, averaged 92.9, 23 games. This is one, I guess, that goes in the Houston factor, but I think the benefit with Rioli is he's had the same coach, but now at the Suns, so we know the role is pretty much going to stay the same, considering Hardwick was the one that transformed into that halfback gen. High of 135, a low of 54. I think that 54 was a bit of an anomaly. I mean, most of his scores are around that 80 to 110. More so the low hundreds, if anything. I think he locks up that half-back role alongside Johnny Noble. I think those two were the signings they needed. They're going to lock them up for the halfback for years to come. I would assume that Rioli is a kick-out taker. I could be wrong, but I wouldn't be surprised if he's the one that gets it. We looked at how well that, at Richmond, he was able to, in plays, was able to transform the ball from the back 50 to inside 50 in a flash with the pace he's got on himself, his kick. I can only see that improving at the Suns, considering they've got better ball users. What are your thoughts, Nathan, on Rioli? And is he in your side in 2025?
Yep, lock and load. That's all I'll say. Lock and load. What you're getting. You know what you're getting with him. He's under the same coach. The Gold Coast Suns need him to be at their best, to be at his best, for them to be at their best. So Hardwick's going to give him every opportunity to be at his best, and his best is off the halfback flank. I could even see that average pushing into 100 next year. So I just think lock and load.
Yeah, no, I do agree as well. I think he's one that is definitely viable for a spot in the top 6 defensive SuperCoach side. And I think if you do jump on him early before, he might go gangbusters for the Suns, and then everyone jumps on him and you've kind of lost that POD. He's won as a POD, that's for sure. He was a POD at the Richmond and probably wasn't given enough respect considering how bad Richmond went, but the Suns are primed for a finals position. And I think they have to in the next 2 years to stay relevant in the AFL altogether. And yeah, I think he's one that, the Suns have rebranded, and I think Rioli's kind of that first piece in a push for finals in 2025. But moving on to our last 3 players, this is the final one of our trader players before we move on to delisted free agents. Caleb Daniel was a hot topic when he was linked to North, averaged 49.9, 15 games. A lot of them were subs, a low of 40, a high of 107. He was one that, even the season before was touted as a top 6 defender as times. He was elite ball user. I have no idea why the Dogs decided to go against Daniel. I just don't see why they don't benefit from his services with his kicking skills, considering the Dogs' ball use was very, very poor at times. I could see him playing as a back pocket halfback. North, it's very, very obvious from having been an owner of Aaron Hall, Tom Powell, who else was there? Zach Fisher. Harry Sheasel. They love to give the ball to those halfback users, those elite foot skills, and they love to give it to them like it's cotton candy. Having said that, Caleb Daniel adds to that kind of plethora of North Melbourne defenders. None of them were delisted or role changed. I could see maybe Zach Fisher not getting a gig now that Daniel's in the side. Sheasel potentially getting Daniel in pushes Sheasel more as a full-time mid role. What are your thoughts on Daniel as an option? He's going to be cheap, I believe, next season anyway. Is there a world that you pick him in, or do you reckon he's one of them that is a watch for positions in next year's North side?
At this stage, he's lock and load. At this stage, he's lock and load. I can see the one who I think this frees up. I think it frees up two of them. I think Harry Sheasel will become Nick Dacos, that mid forward, and then I think Rooster, as he's called, Colby McKercher, will end up playing off a wing or in the midfield. So I think this just frees up that half-back flank. And I can see Daniel and Zach Fisher causing mayhem for sides this year. I think North have finally, at least on paper, got themselves a list that they can probably say is going to push them out of that top three. And, sort of work their start. Pardon? So bottom three, three, and start working their way up the ladder. It's not top three, sorry, bottom three. And, I think Daniel's going to be a big part of this. So at this stage, for me, he's lock and load. But again, that might change depending on how he gets through pre-season and what his form's like and his role. Because if he's playing off the halfback, I think you know what you're getting. But if he's sort of that midfielder that he became, I think he's probably going to be in a void. I guess for me, the one question I'm going to have is what is his position going to be for SuperCoach? If it's a defender, it'd be lock and load as that sort of mid-price. So if he's a midfielder, I think it becomes a bit harder to justify doing that.
Yeah.
I think for me, if he's a defender, he'll be lock and load at this stage.
Yeah, no, I do agree. I think you raise a really good point with regards to Colin McKercher. Like, he's one that everyone picked this season, flourished in that halfback role. But yeah, as we saw, Alistair Clarkson wasn't afraid of McKercher pushing onto a wing. He's got that elite running skill and foot skill, and it probably exposes him to utilise that foot skill more in the inside 50 anyway. And they
want him forward anyway.
Yeah, they use him.
They want him kicking forward anyway. They don't want him kicking off the halfback flank. They want him kicking the ball inside 50. So
yeah, they used him a lot.
Yeah, that's where I sit.
Yeah, at the wing anyway, post-injury. I know he's injured a few times as an owner this season, so I was aware of where he was playing. And yeah, it was frustrating as an owner, considering when he was playing halfback, he was dominating them wing. It was almost like he lost a bit, but I think having a full preseason in that midfield wing role would really benefit him as a player, but not necessarily SuperCoach-wise. So I think this is a double-edged sword. Caleb Daniel, a big watch for preseason, but we both are happy as a lock if you want to bring him in your sides. But on the flip side, watch Colby McKercher in particular, because I think that's going to impact him heavily. And be careful if you want to bring him in round one, McKercher as well, considering how well he was playing as a halfback. But two delisted free agents before we call it a night tonight. Jack Martin was picked up. This was a trade that was always going to happen, but yeah, went into delisted free agency. 40 average, 3 games. This is really one that it's more of a what if pick, I think, if he stays fit. A high of 68, low of 12. So, SuperCoach scores this season, we're out the question. New club. We all know what the Cats do to players that look like they're down and out in other clubs. They seem to have this weird knack of turning around and turning them to superstars. Probably plays a half forward role. I reckon really complements Jeremy Cameron really nicely. Probably makes that 3-pronged attack, potentially maybe with Shannon Neal playing as a full forward. Cameron half forward, and then Jack Martin as that kind of Tim Membry pushing up the ground role. What are your thoughts on Martin? Because he's going to be pretty dirt cheap come for the Cats. A, do you reckon he's going to get his body right? And B, do you reckon you pick him?
Well, you do touch on Geelong having a knack of getting their bodies right. I mean, it's hard at this stage to say he will. But if there's one club that can do it, other than probably Brisbane, it's probably Geelong. So I at this stage, I'm going to say no to the first question. The second question, I think you've basically described what I had him doing, which was that sort of high half forward, third key, if you will, pushing up the ground. We saw that he really flourished in that role as Carlton. I guess the only problem is he's going to have to kick goals to actually
Yeah,
score,
yeah,
which is a downside of perhaps picking him. So, look, he might be one that I might consider depending on price, but at this stage, it's probably a watch list for me,
yeah,
just because his body breaks down all the time. But yeah, he will be very cheap.
yeah,
But yeah, I just want to sort of see some a role in him, and I guess because Geelong are playing opening round this year, if he does go gangbusters in that opening game against Brisbane, well, you can always bring him in because I don't think the trades start until round one for Classic anyway.
yeah,
So you basically have a free hit for him in opening round. So if he goes gangbusters, you probably bring him in.
yeah,
If he doesn't, well, then you can probably either decide to avoid him or go down that path if you want. But I think if you do pick him, he's going to be a slow burn. But I think he's probably going to get a game most weeks because I don't think there's anyone there who's really there. I think the only one who I would have flagged was Rowan, but he got delisted. So yeah, I feel like there's a role there for Munn. Whether or not it translates to Supercoach scoring is probably the more debatable part for me. So at this stage, I'm going to say no. Or actually, at this stage, I'm going to say no. I'll just leave it
yeah.
at that.
No, I do agree. I think he's one that, I don't think he's probably going to stay in the park as much as, Geelong have this insane retention rate of it transforming players to superstars. Yeah, he's one of those players that every time I watch, he just gets injured. There's always that potential. He clunks like 3 to 4 contested, has a couple goals, and all of a sudden you think, this guy's he's going to dominate the next couple of weeks and just gets a soft tissue injury. So I wouldn't trust him by any means. I think I wouldn't say it's more the case this is a high reward, low risk situation because he's going to be dirt cheap anyway. I think he's going to be in that high rookie price, low, 200s where it's like if it goes shit, you can probably get rid of him anyway. So I think if he does, as Nathan said, you get that lucky opening round fixture against the Lions. You can see him doing quite well there anyway. Considering the Lions' defense is not the best at the best of times. So, yeah, one to definitely keep on your radar, just if he does score well in that first round, someone to jump on as well for the short stint anyway. The lucky last, we've started with St Kilda, we'll end it with St Kilda and Jack Carroll. This was the last of the kind of late news that broke 2 days ago with regards to the delisted free agency period. With the Saints signing up Jack Carroll, which I don't mind as a St Kilda supporter from an AFL perspective. But 15 games, 41.7 average was a rookie-based price this season. Pretty much everyone, I think, that I knew that was playing Supercoach got him in at some point. Was a high of 74, had opportunities to score quite well, just never really strung 4 quarters together, a low of 29. This was obviously non-sub effective score, but again, as we say, a lot of these players who are scoring in that 40 to 60 range and have any more games than more than 10. A lot of them are sub-affected. Just didn't really get consistency in that Carlton lineup. Was never really had a good look in with the likes of Walsh, Cripps, Chera, Kennedy. It's one of those midfields which are hard to break through, similar to the Dogs. I think, he's probably, with regards to potential, maybe a bit more ahead of the pecking order, ahead of Paddy Dow when we brought him in. But he's more of a depth player, I think. But if he has a great preseason, I could see him doing some damage come round one, either inside mid as a high half forward. But I would say he's more of a best 22 player than maybe a sub player. I could see him being, as I said, more of a depth player, but I could see him adding some significant value. There's a lot of raps on this kid. A lot of Carlton supporters weren't too happy that he left the Blues. They thought he added some value regardless. And as a St Kilda supporter, I can't complain either. He's in that young, only 21 years old, so has a long career ahead of him. And if he can maintain a spot, watch out, I think, because he has that ability to explode out of packs and kick goals. What are your thoughts, Nathan, on do you reckon he was an underrated, overrated pick at Carlton, and how do you think he fares at St Kilda from a Supercoach perspective?
Yeah, I think he was. I think he was unlucky to get delisted. So I think he definitely deserves a second chance. Just sometimes we see with these types of players who do get delisted and picked up, sometimes they can actually become really good players after getting delisted. I guess it gives them extra incentive because they sort of know what it's like to be without a club. At this stage, it's a no for me.
Yeah.
But again, he might be one that I chuck to the watch list and just watch him over preseason. But at this stage, it's a no for me.
Yeah. No, I do agree. I think, look, he's probably going to be at an inflated price anyway due to the games he's played. So he's going to be at that awkward price regardless. So, yeah, I do agree with Nathan. I think as much as he has potential to be a good player, I don't think that SuperCoach-wise relevant. That 15 games is going to hurt with regards to the new price for 2025. But before we wrap it up for today, just to recap for those of you who are considering or looking to start building your 2025 SuperCoach team early before the picker comes out, and I believe it's December usually when they start releasing it, or early January. Jack Macrae, we all think is a lock. Harry Perryman, no. Houston watch list heavily, but I think he should be on everyone's radar very closely. Cumming, no. Peatling, probably not. Nick Haynes, no. Bailey Smith, yes. Rioli, yes. Caleb Daniel, yes. Jack Martin, no. And Carroll, no. So hopefully that gives you a bit of a summation on those traded players. There's obviously a few players we left out, like the likes of Luke Parker, Tim Membry, all trades to new clubs, Jake Stringer. You know, we can't obviously fit everyone in. There's probably a few that are a little bit stiff to miss out on this list. Both speaking from in terms of SuperCoach and an AFL perspective at the new club, but we can't fit them all in the time we have today. So hopefully you enjoyed that episode of the traded players and how they link to SuperCoach in 2025. Hopefully this will get out onto your screens on Monday, and then I believe the draft is on the 20th of November, which is next Wednesday. So
Correct.
I'm hoping get the draft episode out before then. I'm hoping that comes out Tuesday night, just so you have that in time. As a bit of a draft guide to when the draft gets announced on Wednesday evening, and it's going to be a very interesting draft. I think a lot of clubs are looking to kind of get as many picks in that first round as possible, considering this is almost touted as that next super draft, and there's definitely a lot of talent available, and a lot of those players, I would believe, are round one ready and could kind of change the SuperCoach landscape from this year, and the fact that, you know, you could almost stock up on more rookies if there's more rookies available ready for everyone, that's for sure. But other than that, hope you have a great weekend and the rest of your week, and we'll catch you for the draft day.